What if the darkest corners of history are not as far behind us as we think? What if a story so terrifying, so gruesome, has been lurking in the shadows of the internet? An urban legend that taps into our deepest fears about government power and the loss of control. Welcome to the chilling tale of the Russian sleep experiment. A story so sinister, it will make you question everything you thought you knew about science, trust, and the horrors humanity is capable of when hidden away in secrecy. But here's the twist. What if this story isn't just a fiction? What if this eerie experiment, supposedly carried out by the Soviet Union, is far closer to the truth than we dare admit? Tonight, we explore the disturbing events that might have inspired this urban legend and the terrifying implications they carry. Stick with us until the end as we reveal the dark secrets buried beneath the chilling details of this horrific tale. Before we begin, did you know that many people watching this aren't subscribed to the channel? If you want to keep exploring the world's darkest mysteries and uncover the unsettling truths that most people would rather forget, hit that subscribe button now. You won't want to miss the stories that will keep you questioning reality long after the screen goes dark. Now, let's dive into the nightmare that still haunts us today, one that might just be closer to reality than we ever imagined. For over a decade, the legend of the Russian sleep experiment has haunted the corners of the internet. This supposed Soviet-era study claims that 5 political prisoners were subjected to a disturbing experiment in which they were deprived of sleep for extended periods, leading to horrific consequences like psychosis, self-mutilation, and grotesque deaths. The story became a viral sensation, leaving many people terrified of the lengths to which governments might go in the name of science. But how much of this terrifying tale is rooted in reality, and how much is simply a product of internet horror fiction? To answer that, we must first examine the origins of the Russian sleep experiment, a story that, while chilling, is entirely fictional. It was first posted in 2010 on the Creepypasta wiki by a user known as Orange Soda. The narrative describes an experiment that allegedly took place in 1947 in a secret Soviet facility. 5 prisoners were exposed to a stimulant gas that kept them awake for 15 days with devastating effects. As the story goes, the prisoners eventually descended into madness, turning into violent zombie-like creatures addicted to the very gas that kept them awake. Their deaths were gruesome and violent, their bodies left behind as a grim reminder of the horrors of Soviet experimentation. The popularity of the Russian sleep experiment grew rapidly after its initial release, with thousands of people sharing the story across social media, blogs, and horror forums. It quickly became one of the most well-known creepypasta stories of all time, earning praise for its disturbing imagery and chilling premise. Its success wasn't just due to the shock factor, though. The story played into the collective fears of government overreach and the dark side of scientific experimentation during the Cold War. It was easy for many to believe that the Soviet Union, notorious for its secrecy and ruthless treatment of dissidents, could have conducted such horrific experiments. The story seemed plausible because it aligned with what people already knew or feared about the era's real-life human experimentation programs. However, while the Russian sleep experiment felt true to many, it was a complete work of fiction. The story's appeal rested in its perfect blend of psychological horror and science fiction, tapping into the fear of losing control over one's own body and mind. The idea of being trapped in an experiment, unable to escape and subject to extreme deprivation, was a universal fear. But why did this particular narrative resonate so deeply, and how did it become so believable to a large audience? The answer lies in its chilling realism. At the time the story went viral, the public was already familiar with numerous accounts of unethical experiments carried out by both the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. These real-life cases, combined with the ever-present threat of global conflict, made the idea of such experiments seem more than just a scary story. They seemed like a possibility. Despite the fact that the Russian sleep experiment is purely a work of fiction, there have been real studies on sleep deprivation conducted by Soviet scientists, though these studies were vastly different in both intent and methodology. One of the earliest documented cases of sleep deprivation research in Russia came from Dr. Marie de Manassein, a pioneering Russian scientist who studied sleep in the late 19th century. In 1894, Dr. de Manassein conducted an experiment on puppies, depriving them of sleep in order to observe the effects of sleep deprivation on their bodies. Her research showed that sleep deprivation could lead to fatal consequences, particularly brain damage, after only a few days. Dr. de Manassein's findings were some of the first to suggest that sleep is essential for brain health, and her research set the stage for future studies on the subject. However, unlike the Russian sleep experiment, which portrays gruesome transformations and terrifying outcomes, the real studies focused on understanding the vital nature of sleep and its connection to neural function. These early experiments, while primitive by modern standards, were grounded in science and did not aim to create the kind of horror depicted in the creepypasta. In fact, Dr. de Manassein's work was among the first to demonstrate that sleep deprivation could be fatal, but it also revealed the importance of sleep as a critical biological function. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union became interested in a completely different approach to sleep research, one that was far more optimistic and scientific than the terrifying tale of the Russian sleep experiment. One of the most notable areas of research was sleep learning, or the idea that people could learn new information while they were asleep. The concept of sleep learning gained considerable traction in the Soviet Union during the 1970s, with various institutions and researchers experimenting with methods to inject knowledge into the subconscious mind during sleep. Soviet scientists believed that people could absorb foreign language vocabulary, facts, or even mathematical formulas while they slept, provided the right stimuli were used. While this idea was intriguing, the actual scientific results were not as groundbreaking as many had hoped. A report published by New Scientist in 1970 revealed that the Soviets had invested heavily in developing sleep learning techniques, with several government-backed institutions working to create systems that could imprint information into the minds of sleepers. However, despite the enthusiasm surrounding these efforts, the actual evidence supporting the effectiveness of sleep learning was minimal. These experiments, while unusual, were far from the horrific conditions of sleep deprivation depicted in the creepypasta. In fact, the Soviet Union's real sleep research, though certainly unconventional, did not involve the kind of violent, mind-altering experiments that have come to define the Russian sleep experiment. To fully understand why the Russian sleep experiment might resonate with so many people, it's important to place it within the broader historical context of unethical human experimentation during the Cold War. Both the United States and the Soviet Union engaged in disturbing and often inhumane research involving human subjects, driven by political paranoia and a desire to gain scientific and military superiority over the other. In the United States, one of the most notorious programs was MK-Ultra, a covert CIA initiative that began in the early 1950s. MK-Ultra sought to investigate methods of mind control using drugs, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and other forms of psychological manipulation on unwitting individuals in order to enhance interrogation techniques and gain an upper hand in the Cold War. The experiments conducted under MK-Ultra were horrifying. The CIA administered drugs like LSD without consent, and subjects were exposed to extreme psychological stress, including sensory deprivation and isolation. In some cases, individuals were subjected to sexual abuse and other forms of trauma in an attempt to break down their resistance and extract information. Although MKUltra was officially terminated in 1973, its legacy of unethical experimentation left a dark stain on American history, and the chilling details of the program helped fuel the narrative that the government could conduct horrific experiments on its own citizens. This fear, though based in truth, also laid the groundwork for stories like the Russian sleep experiment, where the idea of cruel, secretive research in totalitarian regimes seemed all too believable. On the Soviet side, there was also a significant and secretive program of human experimentation during the Cold War, particularly within the realm of biological warfare. One of the most infamous Soviet programs was Biopreparat, a large-scale initiative to develop biological weapons. The program aimed to weaponize deadly pathogens such as anthrax, smallpox, and the plague, and it is believed that the Soviet Union had prepared these weapons to be used against the West, with major American cities such as New York and Los Angeles potentially being targets. In 1992, Dr. Kanachan Alibekov, a former Biopreparat official who defected to the United States, revealed the true scale and scope of the program. According to Alibekov, the Soviets considered biological weapons to be a crucial component of their military strategy during the Cold War, with the intention of causing mass casualties in the event of a global conflict. The weapons developed under Biopreparat were among the deadliest known, and the program represented a clear violation of international agreements that prohibited the development of biological weapons. While the Soviet Union's biological weapons research was terrifying in its own right, it had nothing to do with the kind of sleep-depriving, mind-altering experiments described in the Russian sleep experiment. The focus of Biopreparat was on creating biological agents for warfare, not psychological or neurological manipulation. In the 1970s and 1980s, there was growing concern among American intelligence agencies regarding reports of Soviet research into psychotronics, a field that explored the potential use of electronic devices to influence human behavior. The idea of psychotronic weapons was unsettling. Soviet scientists were allegedly working on technology that could use things like X-rays, ultrasound, and radio waves to control the mind, induce hallucinations, cause illness, or even cause death. These theories fueled fear and paranoia in the West, with some reports claiming that the Soviet Union was on the verge of developing new forms of psychological warfare that could target individuals at a distance, manipulating their thoughts and emotions without their knowledge. Despite the alarming nature of these reports, there has been little concrete evidence to support the existence of such psychotronic weapons. Most of what the West feared was based on speculation and rumors, amplified by the growing tension between the US and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. While it's true that the Soviets explored many unconventional scientific fields during this time, including theories about mind control and psychological manipulation, the actual research on psychotronics never produced the devastating weapons that were feared. Nonetheless, the rumors and concerns about these technologies contributed to the overall narrative of Soviet cruelty and secrecy, feeding into stories like the Russian sleep experiment and the idea that the Soviet government might have been conducting horrific experiments on its own citizens. While the Russian sleep experiment may be an eerie tale of horror, the actual science of sleep deprivation is much less sensational. The longest documented period someone has stayed awake is just over 11 days, a record set by Randy Gardner in 1963. Gardner's experiment, conducted at Stanford University, was the most controlled and scientifically observed case of sleep deprivation. During this time, Gardner experienced significant psychological and physical effects, including mood swings, severe memory impairment, difficulty concentrating, paranoia, and even hallucinations. Gardner's case showed how quickly the human mind deteriorates without sleep, and it highlighted the dangers of extreme sleep deprivation. Despite this impressive feat, Gardner's record doesn't come close to the 30 days of sleep deprivation described in the Russian sleep experiment. The human body and brain simply cannot endure such a length of time without sleep. Medical experts, such as Dr. Pochang Su, have pointed out that while substances like caffeine or certain stimulants can temporarily stave off sleep, no drug or chemical can keep a person awake for an extended period without causing severe psychological and physiological damage. The idea that a gas or stimulant could prevent sleep for 30 days, as described in the fictional experiment, is not supported by any credible scientific evidence. In fact, after just 48 hours without sleep, the cognitive function of an individual deteriorates rapidly, and they become disoriented, prone to making mistakes, and unable to perform effectively in any capacity. Despite being debunked as fiction, the Russian sleep experiment continues to circulate as if it were a real historical event. Its persistence can be attributed to its ability to tap into primal fears and to the cultural fascination with dark, disturbing stories. As with many urban legends, the line between fact and fiction becomes blurred, especially in the age of the internet, where sensational stories can spread rapidly, often without scrutiny. The internet has become a breeding ground for these kinds of myths, where stories like the Russian sleep experiment gain traction because they are unsettling and capture the imagination of audiences seeking thrills and horror. The continued popularity of the Russian sleep experiment is also evident in the media. In 2019, a film was released titled The Soviet Sleep Experiment, based directly on the Creepypasta. The film follows the same premise as the original story, presenting the chilling scenario of Soviet researchers conducting a sleep deprivation experiment that goes horribly wrong. The film, like the story, capitalizes on the terrifying nature of the myth, reinforcing the sense of horror and intrigue that the original Creepypasta created. This adaptation demonstrates how the myth has transcended its origins as an internet story and has become a cultural touchstone for modern horror. Experts like Dr. Joe Stubbersfield, a psychologist at the University of Winchester who studies cognitive biases and the spread of misinformation, explain that the reason these kinds of urban legends persist is that they are often told as if they are true. Even if listeners don't fully believe in them, the very act of storytelling and the emotion that comes with it make the story compelling. As Dr. Stubbersfield points out, these kinds of myths are powerful because they play into our fears and anxieties, and they continue to circulate because they resonate on a deep, emotional level. The lasting impact of the Russian sleep experiment is a prime example of how modern urban legends are shaped by the internet and the digital age. In an era where information spreads at lightning speed, stories like these can quickly evolve, adapt, and become deeply embedded in popular culture. The internet, with its anonymity and global reach, allows stories to be shared, modified, and reinterpreted by millions of people around the world, creating a sense of community around shared fears and fascinations. This is why stories like the Russian sleep experiment persist, despite being debunked time and time again. Part of what makes the Russian sleep experiment so captivating is the mix of elements that make it feel grounded in reality. It's not just the idea of a secret Soviet project, but the notion that something as fundamental as sleep could be manipulated, controlled, and exploited for sinister purposes. This idea taps into a deep subconscious fear that many people have about losing control over their own bodies and minds. The fear of being experimented on or used as a lab rat by a government or powerful entity is not just theoretical. It's a fear based on real historical events, such as the experiments conducted by both the Soviet and American governments during the Cold War. The Russian sleep experiment plays on this fear, even as it fabricates the details of the story to make it more horrifying and engaging. Moreover, the digital age has made it easier for stories like this to gain a life of their own. With platforms like Reddit, YouTube, and various forums, the Russian sleep experiment quickly spread far beyond its origins as a simple creepypasta. It became part of a broader internet subculture that celebrates dark, disturbing narratives. YouTube channels, social media influencers, and horror filmmakers have embraced the myth, producing videos, films, and other content that further cement the story in the public consciousness. The myth continues to grow and evolve, becoming a touchstone for internet horror and a symbol of the kinds of fears and anxieties that dominate the digital age. One of the more intriguing aspects of the Russian sleep experiment is how it embodies the way urban legends evolve in the modern world. In earlier times, rumors and myths spread through word of mouth, often being distorted as they traveled from one person to another. Today, however, the spread of misinformation is instantaneous, thanks to the digital platforms we use daily. Social media, blogs, and forums act as amplifiers for these types of stories, giving them the opportunity to gain traction at an unprecedented rate. Once a story like the Russian sleep experiment takes hold, it's nearly impossible to stop its spread, even when factual information debunking the story is readily available. The internet has given rise to a culture of misinformation, where people are often more inclined to share sensational stories without questioning their validity. The Russian sleep experiment is just one example of how urban legends can take on a life of their own. These kinds of stories, fueled by the anonymity of the internet and the desire for thrill and shock, are often passed on without a second thought. This is made even easier by the fact that the internet has become a primary source of information for millions of people worldwide. For many, the line between fact and fiction has become increasingly blurred, especially when a story is as emotionally charged as this one. The power of a good story should not be underestimated, and the Russian sleep experiment has all the elements that make a story compelling: secrecy, horror, government control, and the fear of being subjected to something uncontrollable. These are themes that resonate deeply with modern anxieties, especially in a world where we feel increasingly powerless in the face of global events, technological advances, and governmental authority. These fears are amplified by stories like the Russian sleep experiment, which taps into a collective sense of unease about the future and the unknown. The enduring power of the Russian sleep experiment in the realm of popular culture can also be seen in its adaptation into film and other media. The 2019 film titled The Soviet Sleep Experiment is a direct adaptation of the Creepypasta, cementing the story's place in modern horror. Like the original narrative, the film portrays the chilling events of a Soviet experiment gone wrong, with researchers using a gas to keep their test subjects awake for an extended period. The film leans heavily into the horror elements of the story, emphasizing the disturbing psychological and physical breakdowns of the test subjects, reinforcing the fear and shock that the original story conveyed. This adaptation is a prime example of how stories from the internet can transcend their origins and become part of mainstream entertainment. Films, documentaries, and YouTube channels devoted to horror often draw from urban legends like the Russian sleep experiment, because they are inherently captivating and provoke deep emotional responses from audiences. However, the fact that this story is presented in such a realistic manner, despite its complete lack of truth, highlights the power of fiction to blur the lines between reality and fantasy. The film adaptation, along with countless YouTube videos and online discussions, serves as a testament to the continued cultural fascination with the story, ensuring that it remains in the public consciousness for years to come. This cultural obsession with urban legends, such as the Russian sleep experiment, can be troubling, as it often leads to the spread of misinformation and the acceptance of false narratives as truth. As Dr. Joe Stubbersfield, a psychologist at the University of Winchester, notes, urban legends thrive because they are often told as if they are true, even if listeners don't believe them completely. This element of storytelling, where myths are presented with such conviction, reinforces their appeal, making them seem more plausible and encouraging people to share them with others. In the digital age, this process is magnified as stories like the Russian sleep experiment can go viral in an instant. becoming part of the global cultural fabric in a way that would have been unimaginable just a few decades ago. The rise of urban legends like the Russian sleep experiment in the digital age speaks to a broader cultural shift in how we consume and interact with stories. In earlier generations, people relied on traditional media such as books, newspapers, and television for information. In today's world, however, the internet serves as the primary source of information for millions of people, making it easier than ever for myths and rumors to spread. Social media platforms, video sharing sites, and blogs act as conduits for these stories, often amplifying their reach and impact. What was once a local legend shared among a small group of people now has the potential to become a global phenomenon in the span of hours. This rapid spread of information, both factual and false, has given rise to what many experts refer to as a post-truth era, where the distinction between reality and fiction has become increasingly difficult to discern. Stories like the Russian sleep experiment thrive in this environment because they appeal to our emotions and primal fears, often bypassing our rational thinking in favor of shock value and intrigue. These stories are sensational, unsettling, and just plausible enough to make us wonder if there might be some truth to them. The more emotionally charged a story is, the more likely it is to be shared and discussed online, where the line between fact and fiction becomes increasingly blurred. In many ways, the Russian sleep experiment serves as a case study in how modern myths are created and perpetuated. It's not just the content of the story that makes it compelling, but the way it is disseminated and shared across digital platforms. The story is told repeatedly, with each retelling adding new details, embellishments, and interpretations, further distorting the line between fact and fiction. This process of constant reinterpretation and amplification is what allows myths like the Russian sleep experiment to endure, even when they have been debunked time and time again. The phenomenon of the Russian sleep experiment also highlights the increasing role of cognitive biases in how we process and share information. In the digital age, cognitive biases are the mental shortcuts our brains use to make sense of the world, but they often lead to faulty reasoning and decision-making. One of the most powerful cognitive biases is the confirmation bias, which occurs when we are more likely to accept information that aligns with our existing beliefs and ignore or dismiss information that contradicts them. In the case of the Russian sleep experiment, many people were drawn to the story because it fit neatly into their preconceived notions of government conspiracies and the cruelty of totalitarian regimes. This confirmation bias is further fueled by the internet, which creates echo chambers, environments where people are exposed only to information that reinforces their beliefs. When a story like the Russian sleep experiment is shared among like-minded individuals, it is accepted as truth, regardless of its factual accuracy. The digital platforms that facilitate this process, such as social media, forums, and YouTube channels, serve as amplifiers for misinformation, creating a feedback loop where the same false narratives are repeated and reinforced over time. As these stories continue to spread, they become more ingrained in popular culture, making it even harder to separate myth from reality. Moreover, the internet has democratized the creation and dissemination of information. Anyone with access to a computer or smartphone can create and share content, whether it's a blog post, video, or social media update. This has led to a proliferation of stories, both true and false, that are presented as if they are factual. As a result, people are increasingly exposed to an overwhelming amount of information, much of which is unreliable or misleading. The Russian sleep experiment is just one example of how easily misinformation can spread in the digital age, and how difficult it can be to correct once it has taken root in the public consciousness. The rapid spread of urban legends, like the Russian sleep experiment, is not just a byproduct of the digital age, it's also a reflection of deeper societal anxieties. As the world becomes more interconnected and information flows faster than ever, people are often left feeling more uncertain and fearful. In times of global instability, political turmoil, and rapid technological change, stories that tap into these fears tend to resonate deeply with the public. The Russian sleep experiment, with its themes of government control, loss of individual autonomy, and the fear of dehumanizing scientific experimentation, strikes a chord with many people, particularly in an era where conspiracy theories and fears of authoritarian regimes are prevalent. These types of stories often thrive in environments where trust in traditional institutions, such as government, media, and scientific research, has eroded. In such an atmosphere, it's easy to see why the Russian sleep experiment feels plausible to so many. It aligns with a growing distrust of authority and an increasing concern that powerful governments or corporations might conduct experiments on unsuspecting individuals. The Internet, with its ability to connect people across borders and ideologies, only amplifies these fears. As people share these stories and find communities of like-minded individuals, they reinforce the belief that the story might be true, even in the absence of any factual evidence. The continued popularity of stories like the Russian sleep experiment is a reminder of how important it is to question the information we consume. In an age where anyone can create content and present it as truth, it's more crucial than ever to develop critical thinking skills and to be mindful of the sources of the information we encounter. While stories like these are fascinating and terrifying, it's essential to remember that not everything shared online is rooted in reality. The fear and fascination they provoke may be real, but the events themselves are often entirely fictional. In addition to the psychological and cultural factors at play, the spread of myths like the Russian sleep experiment also highlights the shift in how we interact with information. Historically, information was often gatekept by institutions like governments, universities, and media outlets, which provided some level of quality control. However, the democratization of information through the internet has changed this dynamic. Now anyone with an internet connection can publish content and reach a global audience, bypassing traditional media channels. While this has given rise to incredible opportunities for creativity, learning, and innovation, it has also opened the door for misinformation to flourish. As the internet has become an essential tool for information, entertainment, and communication, it has simultaneously become a breeding ground for falsehoods and conspiracy theories. Stories like the Russian sleep experiment thrive in such an environment because they are designed to shock, provoke fear, and challenge established norms. These types of narratives exploit the human tendency to embrace sensational stories, particularly those that seem to reveal hidden truths about the world. The internet, with its algorithms and viral sharing mechanisms, amplifies these stories, helping them spread far and wide. It's easy to see how a seemingly plausible story, like the Russian sleep experiment, can take root in the collective consciousness, especially when it taps into anxieties about control, government secrecy, and the potential for abuse of power. However, as we've seen with the Russian sleep experiment, the line between fact and fiction can often become blurred in the digital age. The fact that this story has been so widely circulated, despite being a complete fabrication, speaks to the power of storytelling in the modern world. In the age of the internet, stories can be told with such conviction and attention to detail that they feel real, even when they are not. As a result, it's become increasingly difficult to separate fact from fiction, particularly when it comes to sensational stories that appeal to our emotions and fears. In many ways, the Russian sleep experiment represents the dangers of the post-truth era, where emotional resonance often outweighs factual accuracy. As we move forward in the digital age, the importance of media literacy and critical thinking cannot be overstated. The rise of urban legends, conspiracy theories, and viral myths like the Russian sleep experiment highlights the need for individuals to be more discerning about the information they encounter. The internet has revolutionized how we access and share knowledge, but it has also made it easier for misinformation to spread unchecked. With the sheer volume of content being uploaded every minute, it's essential that we develop the skills to evaluate the credibility of sources and the reliability of the stories we come across. The Russian sleep experiment may seem like just another internet horror story, but its cultural impact goes far beyond the digital realm. It serves as a case study of how fear, emotion, and sensationalism can be used to manipulate our perceptions of reality. As we've seen with this myth, it is often the most disturbing and unsettling stories that have the greatest appeal, and the internet provides an ideal platform for these stories to spread rapidly. The challenge, however, is not just identifying false stories, but understanding why they resonate with us in the first place. Why do certain narratives, often rooted in fear and mistrust, find such a willing audience? And how can we, as consumers of information, ensure that we are not perpetuating myths by sharing them without question? In the end, the power of a well-told story is undeniable, but it's crucial to remember that not everything we read online is true. The Russian sleep experiment may be an unsettling tale of horror, but it is also a reminder of the need for skepticism in a world where the boundaries between fact and fiction are increasingly difficult to discern. As we continue to navigate the complexities of the digital age, let us be mindful of the stories we tell, the information we share, and the impact these stories can have on shaping our understanding of the world around us. The truth, as always, is far more complex than the myths we create and perpetuate. As we conclude our exploration of the Russian sleep experiment, it's important to reflect on the broader implications of how stories like this continue to captivate audiences, even when they have no basis in reality. The story's persistence in popular culture is a testament to the power of urban legends in the digital age. These myths tap into our deepest fears and anxieties, and in a world where information spreads faster than ever, it's easier than ever for these stories to take root and thrive. But as we've seen, the truth is far more nuanced and complex than these sensational tales would have us believe. The real history of sleep research, the dark legacy of Cold War experimentation, and the societal forces that shape our collective fears are all far more intricate than the simple, terrifying narrative of the Russian sleep experiment. While the internet has given rise to a new era of storytelling, it has also made it more challenging to separate fact from fiction. As consumers of information, we must be vigilant in questioning the validity of the stories we encounter, understanding their origins, and considering the motivations behind their creation. The challenge moving forward is not just to debunk false narratives, but to recognize why they resonate so deeply with us, and how we can use our understanding of these stories to cultivate a more informed, thoughtful, and skeptical approach to the information we consume. In the end, the Russian sleep experiment serves as a powerful reminder of the role storytelling plays in shaping our perceptions of reality. It may be a work of fiction, but the emotions it evokes, the fears it stirs, and the discussions it sparks are real. As we move further into the digital age, it's crucial that we not only embrace the power of storytelling, but also recognize the responsibility we bear in sharing the truth. So, what do you think? Could the Russian sleep experiment be based on a hidden truth? Or is it just another terrifying tale created to exploit our deepest fears? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and share your opinion on this chilling story. And don't forget, if you want to continue uncovering the world's most disturbing mysteries, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you won't miss any of our upcoming content that could change the way you see everything. Before you go, check out the next video recommended right here on the screen. It's another spine-chilling story you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching. I'm Jack. and I'll see you in the next one.